everyone, welcome to The First Step, a talk show about having the hard conversations. Today I have, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Amy.
And I'm Jessica.
And we're going to be talking about the Asian community, if you couldn't tell. And so before we get started, I have that statement that I'd like to read from the VCIC. The Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities is an 86-year-old organization that started in Lynchburg, Virginia as the Virginia region of the National Conference of Christian and Jews in a grassroots efforts to address community concerns related to anti-Catholicism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Protestantism. Yeah, that's how you say that. And community members took part in interfaith dialogues across Virginia. Over time, conversations grew to include other aspects of social identities like race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, class, and ability status. Today, VCIC is an independent nonprofit that works with schools, businesses, and communities to achieve success through inclusion. VCIC hosts programs year-round for students, including one-day forums like the Diversity Dialogue Day and the Prejudice Awareness Summit, and a week-long summer retreat called Connections. If you'd like to find out more, you can follow VCIC on all their social media, which is Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you guys want a more direct link to them, it's on our website. So before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone that while Jessica and Amy are amazing human beings, and I'm so excited to hear you guys' answers to the questions, we also want to remember that these are their individual experiences, and they obviously are not speaking for the entirety of the community. This is just taking the first step and trying to start the conversations. So take everything that they say into context. So, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Cool. Alright, so the first question is, has anyone confused you/your culture for any other ethnicity/culture? If so, how did that impact you upon hearing that?
So we were just talking about this, how it happens like basically every time you meet someone, like you can't avoid it. Immediately someone's like, what E's are you, or what Asian are you? What E's are you? No, it literally happens so many times, and it's just awkward personally for me. I'm just like, oh, I'm half Vietnamese. I'm like, I knew you were something. I knew you were like hiding something. It's like, no, I'm just me.
Yeah, it's strange. Have you ever? Because I feel like kind of like the default is like, oh, are you Chinese? Like,
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's a difference between asking because you genuinely want to know versus just like, oh, you're this, right? Like, excuse me. But like, I remember freshman year, this was really awkward because Mr. Doyle, I was like introduced, he was like calling rolls like the first day of school, and something I kind of like changed the phonetics of how to say my last name, and Mr. Doyle was like, oh, so you say that in a white way? And I was like, but then there's like people like Mr. Wu, who is like our math teacher here, and he would be like, oh, are you Chinese? And it would be like, he's like trying to connect with, and it's like not in an awkward way. So sometimes it's like awkward and kind of like in an ignorant way. That leaves me like, oh, like you could have asked in a different way.
There's definitely a better way to
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it's like, oh, like they just genuinely were curious. And I would like love to have that conversation with someone if like they were actually interested. And
That's fair.
The first way is to ask like where you're really from. Like,
Yeah.
that's the one I just hate, because
yeah.
I'm born here, I've never traveled to Vietnam.
No, literally, I was born 2 hours away from here, literally in the state of Virginia. But where are you really from?
Yeah.
Well,
Really, I know. It's just, it's the weirdest way. It doesn't make any sense.
there's so many better ways to be genuinely curious and ask.
Yeah.
And yet they
Exactly.
always miss the mark. Okay. Alrighty. The second question we have is, which kind of ties into what we were just talking about. What's the hardest stereotype you've had to deal with, and how has that affected you as an overall person?
The hardest stereotype? Just like joking. People just like always take jokes like a little too far all the time. Like driving, math. Just those things. I'm terrible at math, so those jokes like always.
Oh, like you're a bad
You're a
Asian.
bad Asian, you're so bad. I wear glasses. I bring Asian food to lunch, and sometimes people like smell it and they make comments.
I
That
feel
will
like
always be something that like elementary school was the absolute worst.
have we all gotten the, are you eating dog comment?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's just
Yeah.
like an experience you have to go through as an Asian.
One time I was at at Broby's Landing and someone saw a dog and then saw me and then proceeded to make a comment how that should be my breakfast.
I just,
I guess those stereotypes.
we don't eat dogs. Like,
No, we don't.
we don't. Yeah, I feel like it's kind of, I don't want to say like ironic, but like I feel like nowadays like Asian food is kind of like on the rise and
It's
people
popping.
it's popping, it's popular
That's
as it should
good.
be.
Yeah.
But it's also like y'all bullied us for that.
Yeah.
Someone the other day was like, have you heard of boba? Like, have you heard of that? We should totally try it. I'm like,
What's like-
yes, I grew up with that.
What's like the white way of saying like mansplaining? It's like mansplaining but like white-splaining.
It's like, let me show you this. Your own culture. But the way we like it now.
Oh yeah, when they like take like they like
Reshape or just,
they
yeah.
change it and they make it like they take away the flavor. They take away the seasoning. Like come on.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, it's either like just kind of like how all Asians are smart, or it's like the mental health stereotype. Because it's funny, well, not funny, but I feel like I've dealt with stereotypes the most in my family.
Oh yeah.
And it's like it's like growing up, I grew up in like my Chinese church, and I was never in the gifted program, and my mom would compare me a lot to the other Asian kids, and like, oh, like I did the piano, I did all this stuff, and like she would be confused because she would be like, why aren't you as smart as you're supposed to be? And like, just like with mental health stuff, because I feel like in the Asian community, it's like emotions are seen as a bad thing, and being who you genuinely are. And I was never really allowed to cry. It would make things worse, like those stereotypes. And so I feel like that has affected me, so just feeling like I'm not enough and like I'm an outsider, because I always felt too white for the Asians, but too Asian for like the whites.
Yeah, I totally.
Yeah, say when you're like that awkward like.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like that's like an experience that's shared among like a lot of like mixed folk and also like people who grew up, because I mean you were obviously born in the U.S. or yeah, and so there's that idea of like, yes I'm, you know, in your case, yes I'm Chinese, but I also was born here. Like I was raised in the U.S. I've been raised in this culture, and it's just kind of like that weird sense of like a disconnect because we don't know where we belong.
Right.
Not to get deep or anything. Thank you for sharing that, Jess.
Hard conversations.
Yeah, yes ma'am, hard conversations. Okay, the next one is, how has your family/heritage influenced who you are today?
Honestly, not that much. It kind of makes me feel like a fraud because I grew up very whitewashed, I guess people would say. I was born and raised in Midlothian, Virginia. The only cultural things I guess was celebrate like Tet, which is Chinese New Year, and sing songs sometimes. I don't even know the language. I wasn't taught it when I was growing up, which I kind of regret. I wish I was taught. All I really know is like food, but I've never traveled to Vietnam. I have relatives there, but I've never met them. So it kind of makes me feel a little bit like a fraud when people ask me questions about it, and I don't have like that much personal experience to share.
I think for me, it's just like I feel different from my family in the sense because like I grew up the way I am, and just touching back on like that emotional aspect, I consider myself pretty like a sensitive and empathetic person, and I think that the reason why I am this way is because the cultural gap between my family and I have like grown to be, but when I was little I was embarrassed of my culture because I grew up like the only Chinese kid in my elementary school, and my dad, like going out with my family and stuff, I would be worried what other people would say about them. And just kind of like my dad was raised like with this work ethic, like you've never seen this type of work ethic, and my mom was raised where it was like you have to be strong. And so like those things have affected me, just where it's like when you're faced with things like that, the emotions that you're not little kids a lot of times are shielded from. It kind of requires you to develop these skills, like to be sensitive towards these things, and like you deal with these adult emotions, but you kind of were taught by your family that you're not supposed to feel like this. So definitely seeing like my family, how they respond to certain things, and the cultural gap has allowed me to be who I am today.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's that weird disconnect of like,
Yeah.
I am like, people see me at face value and they like judge you because like we look Asian,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're like, oh, you're Asian, but it's like we don't have that that connection to our culture. And like, are you fluent in Chinese?
Yeah.
I'm about to say, because I never learned Korean, and that's a big point that like dang it, like I wish I
I
had.
know.
Oh, it's like, I feel like when we're like kids, like you touched on this, how like when you're a kid you like want to fit in, because like
Yeah.
every kid wants to fit in, and so especially for like ethnic kids, it's like you try and tone down your heritage,
Right.
and then you get older and you're like, dang it, like
Yeah.
I wish I had done that. Oh gosh. Alrighty. Okay, number 4. What are your thoughts on the spike in hate crimes against Asians because of COVID? Have you been affected?
It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I'm sure you guys have experienced the looks in grocery stores, especially at the very beginning of COVID. My grandmother was yelled at in the grocery store, and it just doesn't make any sense. Like, I guess now people have calmed down about it, but at the beginning it was pretty rough. Like, with my family, my mom was like scared to go out because she kept hearing stories about people getting beat up in the streets. We avoided like Asian restaurants somehow at the very beginning because my mom didn't want to bring that attention to us. But once I told her, I was like, no, it's okay, like we can go to this place, we should support them. Like, we started only buying from them so that we could give them business. But yeah, I remember at the very beginning, it was super weird. I remember sitting in AP World class and watching the news about it in China, and people looked at me in class.
It's like,
It's like, first, I'm here, it doesn't make any sense why you're looking at me, but it was just a strange experience.
Yeah.
It was definitely hard. I remember I agree with everything like Amy said, but I remember around the time, like the peak of it, I was going to New York City for like a little trip to visit my brother, and I went with my friend who's also Asian, and her mom and her mom's friend, and we were really scared to like let them go out, and we were like, it was just a worry because we would never have to worry about that before. Like, oh, we're visiting somewhere, like they can go roam around, like look around the city and everything, but we were genuinely scared that something was going to happen to them, and so that was just nerve-wracking.
Yeah. It was, I remember like the looks in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Like, I think I had gone shopping with my mom, and like a kid had run like by, and their mom like grabbed him and like yanked him away from us. And I was like, oh, word. And it's just like, I don't know, especially because like obviously all of us are well spoken when it comes to English, especially when you have a parent who has a very thick accent. Like, seeing, especially like, I don't know why, but like seeing my mom get looks really bothered me, because like people would kind of just like look at me and be like, okay, whatever, but like they'd hear my mom talk and they like, I could see them like internally being racist.
Yeah.
And it's just like that sense of like, we literally are not related, like we've been here our entire, okay,
So long, yeah.
but it's definitely, especially, I don't like, not to get political, but when you have like political figures calling it like the Kung Flu, doesn't exactly
it
help.
doesn't really help.
It doesn't.
The ironic thing is, it would be like me and my mom the only people wearing a mask in the grocery store, and yet people would like be mad at us for stuff. No,
I feel like
they weren't social distancing; they weren't wearing masks.
yeah, I feel like my mom's Korean church, like they're the most like COVID safe Like of all of like the people that I've interacted with over this pandemic, like they have been the most conscious, they have been the most like strict with their guidelines, and I think it's just kind of ironic. Like obviously that's good. Like we should obviously take it seriously, but it's just kind of funny, for lack of a better word, that like Asians seem to be taking it more seriously than the people who are hate criming them.
Yeah.
But all right, this is a longer question. So, how has the lack of representation, as well as the increase in it, shaped your self-perception and identity? With Disney specifically, at first there was only Mulan, but they recently have been putting out more content with API characters, which I believe stands for Asian Pacific Islander characters, like Moana and Raya and the Last Dragon.
I grew up with Mulan being my favorite movie, and I didn't realize really why until recently. I was like, oh, she's such a warrior and she's so cool and I love her outfit. And I did Taekwondo like my whole life for 9 years.
Yes.
So I really like related to her in that way, but I didn't like, I guess, fully understand why until now with all the like popping up of new Asian Americans in films, where I actually like see the value in it, and I see younger Asian Americans watching these, and they're new superheroes. What's his name in the movie?
Shang-Chi. We were just
Shang-Chi?
talking. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's awesome. I wish I had more of that growing up. It probably would have helped me with my identity, and like we were saying earlier, like not being afraid of our culture and to share it.
Yeah.
It's definitely like, I think all humans, like no matter your race, desire to be like seen and heard, and like especially when you're a kid, you don't like feeling like you're different from everyone else, and because then it makes you feel like something's wrong with you. And so growing up, like not seeing that, I was like the same way. It was just like so cool to see like Mulan and like, oh, like I belong somewhere. And it's like, it's hard when you don't see representation, because it's like, oh, like is there something wrong with like who I am? And like I've always kind of like had a soft spot for when I see, like at my dance studio, when I see younger Asian girls, and it's like really impactful that like to see them look up to me. And I would always look up to like the older girls at my studio that were Asian because I felt connected to them. And so it's really like, I think it means a lot to see new movies coming out with Asian representation, because it's like we're being valued, we're being like represented, like our culture, which is something I wish all cultures would feel like.
Right. I don't think people recognize the value of representation until it's not there.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of like, and you don't realize it's not there until like you see someone who looks like you in film, and you're like, wow, you look like me.
Yeah.
Personally, I didn't even like realize it was missing until it's here now, and I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't have that growing up. Like specifically, I used to play with Barbies, and I always like never had an Asian. They were all like blonde and white, but that was fine because I was like, oh, I shouldn't be there. Like I look different anyways. Like it's fine. This is the pretty Barbie. It's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a little dark.
Yeah.
Got a little deep there, but that's okay. That is what we were aiming for.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty, next question. How can you separate yourself, and I believe this is spoken from the perspective of someone who's not Asian, so how can you separate yourself from the kind of people who genuinely enjoy the culture and traditions and learning about it versus the kind who use it for gain or trendiness in an almost exploited way? Kind of talking, yeah, because we talked a little bit about how like Asian food is like really big right now, but it's also like you guys used to bully us for this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
The thing that bothers me is clothes a little bit, because like just yesterday I was on Instagram and I saw like, can I say slutty? I mean, yeah, but no, because I mean they're slutty outside, but it's just like short and like cut in a weird way, and it's just like if I wore like I have like 20 of these. If I wore one of these traditional ones out, I would be so bullied for that. Well, I just don't understand like that's okay, or like these brands are coming out with these Oriental clothes. Oriental brand.
Well, to speak to that though, like when you say like the slutty dress, I feel like it also ties to like the fact that like Asian women have been like really like fetishized.
Yeah.
Like,
let's talk
hypersexual?
about that.
I had a dance
Mhm.
where it was the year where our studio was doing, like, the theme was, like, books.
Mhm.
And of course, I'm in the trio for Memoirs of a Geisha. And I was the
They
only...
still do geisha dances for.
I was the only Asian at my studio, and I was put into this dance with 2 other white people. And it was very uncomfortable because when the announcer would, like, announce for us to go on, they would pronounce it wrong.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then the whole, like, I was laughing because I was just like, wow, great. Like, he tried a solid, like, 5 times and just couldn't get it right. And, like, I'm, like, awkwardly on stage waiting to start dancing. And, like, the, like, outfits and everything, it was just, like, yeah.
I feel like just they come with it with like a sense of respect. Like I don't think we're trying to like, I don't think any of us are sitting here like hoarding our culture.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like, just like respect it, handle it carefully, and understand like the significance of like certain clothings or certain foods or certain traditions, and just like don't abuse it or make it like a hashtag.
Yeah.
I feel like,
Oh gosh, that reminds me of the fox eye trend.
oh,
That was,
when they like
thing.
pulled their eyes back and
No,
it's
they really
like,
had tape
oh.
down, like.
It's still a thing. It's just like toned down now after the uproar. But that shocked me when it first happened. I was like, are you kidding me?
no, like
Actually, do you have the memory of a goldfish? Like that happened. I was like, what?
oh my gosh, yeah. Alrighty, and then I have the last question, which is actually the one that I pulled from the last episode that I actually spoke with Gabby and Cameron. If you haven't gone and seen the first episode, you should go watch that. But it is, what is the best way that a non-Asian person can show support and solidarity with you? I believe that kind of ties off what we were just talking about with like our culture and everything,
I
but
think it's just listening. And listening before speaking, especially if you don't know. And it's like not being afraid to ask the questions, because it's like no matter how difficult the conversation may be, like that discomfort is where change comes and growth. So not being afraid to just ask in a respectful way, and then learning and gaining the knowledge so that you can be that first step. And then the change comes from that discomfort, like so.
Yeah, well said. I agree. You can't be an advocate if you don't know anything about a culture.
Yeah.
You have to listen and you have to learn. That's period. Like that's it.
you know what I think is very interesting is referencing the last episode is like with both when I was talking to Gabby and Cameron about the Black community and now I'm talking to you guys about the Asian community, when it talks about like support and like solidarity, it's always so simple. Like just listen to us,
Yeah.
don't be racist. Like it's always the simplest of things, but I just thought that was just like just maybe listen.
Yeah.
Maybe just don't talk yet. But yeah, I think that was actually a really cool episode, guys. Thank you for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Oh gosh, what an episode, man. I mean, thank you guys for tuning in and taking the first step with us. What is it? I believe the next episode we're doing is on the Hispanic and Latino community, which I think is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. As always, remember to be kind to each other, and thank you for watching.